Hello all of you wonderful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and today I want to talk to you about loss. It's something that happens quite a lot in gaming, from taking a pasting in Rocket League to being made to look like a right roadie in Rock Band. In short, there's probably always going to be someone better. So what you have are two options. One, you can look at the experience for what it was, a fun challenge and aim to get better, or two, you can quit out with tears stinging in your eyes like a big old blubbering baby who's been caught red-handed by Mr. Parsons as you've tried to pilfer his pears. Hashtag relatable expression there. We should all aim for the former, but there are those who just can't take a loss and will bug out the moment that things aren't going their way. It creates a bad environment and is a stinky character trait. Luckily though, the games on this list do not suffer fools gladly and have come up with ways to make sure that everyone knows how much of a temper tantrum you've been having. I've covered this list before, but now I'm back with 10 more as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 more harsh ways that video games punish you for rage quitting. Number 10. Mortal Kombat 11's quitality makes your body explode. Now, on the previous list, I spoke on the fact that if there's one thing that NetherRealm Studios hates more than a quiet and restrained discussion, it's people rage quitting. After all, this is the truest blood sport and no one will deny them their offering of viscera. Therefore, is it any surprise that within the newest game, the devs have upped their quitality approach to now include a shower of blood? Now, in Mortal Kombat 10, your head would simply explode. In Mortal Kombat 11, your whole body now bursts into a mist of gore, or a giant spike will appear out of nowhere and impair the absent player. So this is actually quite a nice way to deal with the situation of a constantly disconnecting player. They get embarrassed and the remaining player gets to witness something over the top and fun. It's kind of a win-win. Number 9. Dark Souls 2 removes players' summoning abilities. Okay, so here's the thing. For me, Dark Souls 2 is the weakest game in the series. I don't like the near 360 lock-on that enemies have, and I definitely don't like the approach that the game took. However, I have to commend one fantastic bit that was in the game about how to grief disconnecting players. Now, we all know that Dark Souls as a franchise loves two things more than anything else: near-naked speedrunning and invasions. But as you can imagine, not everyone loves the idea of having their world snuck into and then being poked with more holes than Josh's blow-up dolls, and so it's not uncommon for players to be met with a host who's force quitting the game because the conventional quit game button has disappeared when the invasion begins. It's an efficient, if not totally against the spirit of the game method, but it's not one that FromSoft were going to let go unpunished, as if you do this multiple times in quick succession, you'll find that your summoning privileges have been revoked, meaning that you can't call players in for help, nor be drafted in to help out others. However, here's the kicker. While you can't call out for help with all the big beasties in the world, you can still be invaded. And the only way to get rid of this horrible cycle of hard quitting and venom spitting is to use a Bone of Order, an item that you can only usually get hold of once every 10 to 14 hours of non-quitting gameplay. That's right, FromSoft make you work to get back into their good books, just as it should be. Number 8. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's lack of host migration punishes everyone. As wonderful as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is, its lack of host migration during online multiplayer matches is absolutely infuriating. When you combine the quit-happy nature of fighting games with the fact that Smash Online fights typically involve at least 4 players and therefore at least 4 connections, the inability to migrate connections between hosts is a massively fatal flaw. As a result, if the host decides to rage quit, the server dies instantly. This is especially infuriating in big arena battle mode, which allows 8-player lobbies with 4 players fighting while 4 players spectate. If the host gets bored while waiting to fight, they can effectively ruin everyone's game. So this is actually a case of another player's rage quitting punishing everyone involved. A terrible situation for all, right? Number 7. League of Legends puts the player in a low priority queue for 5 games. As you might expect from a game which is as absurdly popular as League of Legends is, there's going to be a selection of the player base that's just going to be more than a little salty from time to time, and who, at the first sign of defeat, will pull the plug on the game just to preserve their stat lines. However, Riot Games was prepared for this and has implemented a novel system called Lever Buster, which absolutely rails on rage quitters by placing them in a low priority queue. queue. To get off this low priority waiting list, you need 5 match-made games completed without incident, which seems like a small price to pay if you love the game, right? I mean, I know that some games can go upwards of 40 minutes, but it's so much better than the alternative, because if you continue to bail out early, you'll be pushed further down the line and could end up waiting up to 20 minutes for a single match. Rough, but ultimately kind of justified. Number 6. Grand Theft Auto Online's dunce hat for bad sports. Now, we covered GTA Online before in the previous list, stating that misery does indeed love company because Rockstar lumps together cheaters and griefers into scumbag servers where they can just annoy each other all day long. But one massive oversight that we forgot to mention concerns a brilliant sight gag included by the devs. Players who routinely act as sore losers by rage quitting from jobs or partaking in antisocial behaviour such as blowing up other players' personal cars will quickly find themselves labelled a bad sport, which not only plops them onto the dark web of servers that I mentioned before, but also nets them this: a dunce hat, which makes everyone aware of what an absolute skunk of a person they are. Also, if you keep pissing people off and being an arse, then your time in the hat and the swamp filth servers will increase, meaning that the worst offenders might not have actually seen a real community for years. Number 5. Destiny 2 bans players for 30 minutes. After the feature was long requested by Destiny 2 players, Bungie finally decided to issue stern punishments to rage quitters last year in the game's PvP multiplayer component, The Crucible. The penalty system typically issues habitual quitters with 30-minute temporary bans, which seems a small but fair inclusion that fit with Bungie's policy of no tolerance towards bad behaviour. However, this had some rather interesting and negative implications when applied to the Crucible playlists, as Bungie started slamming people with bans left, right and centre and didn't seem to realise that removing players from these matches leaves the teams hideously imbalanced, as in these competitive playlists, players don't get replaced. I mean, it's definitely an incentive to stick around, but it does kind of destroy the match if more than a few players quit out early. Number 4. Mario Kart Wii docks players excessive VR points. Mario Kart Wii introduced the Versus Rating, or VR system for multiplayer races, with points earned based on your performance. Place well and you'll earn fat stacks, but end up in last place and you'll lose a huge chunk. The system was rather controversial with fans at the time of the game's release, if only because it was extremely tough to continue building up VR after passing the 6,000 to 7,000 mark, because one bad placing would see you lose a ton of this. However, not as much as you would lose if you fancied acting like a skid mark and pit stopping the race early. Nintendo were clever with this, and you'll find a chunk of your VR wiped out by not taking your losses with a little more dignity. For shame. Number 3. Guitar Hero Live deprives quitters of hard-earned tokens. Despite arriving so late on the scene that the party wasn't just over, but some of the people there had gone on to have kids and die, Guitar Hero Live was a solid bit of fun with an interesting approach to online gameplay. Sadly, the online functionality was switched off by Activision late last year, killing off the GHTV mode, which was kind of like a rolling jukebox of songs and a brilliant way to jam out with mates. One of the features of GHTV was that if you fancied a specific song rather than playing King Crimson for the 1000th time, then you could spend a play token which were earned by completing a few songs in succession. So, guess what Activision held to ransom when players decided to quit out of matches early? Yes, alongside a rather predatory approach to getting you to spend real-life money on these tokens in the first place, rage quitters would find their stash withheld or even docked, and you would be placed in a server with other players who went out on tour all too often. It's not exactly a nice way for Activision to keep the peace, seeing as in some cases you'd actually pay real money for those and they were taking them away from you like parents taking sweets off a baby. But then again, it did help somewhat to mitigate those who wanted to strum out on something else rather than their plastic for a bit. Number 2. Splatoon 2's strongly worded message and a temporary ban. Though Splatoon 2 is one of the most adorable AAA shooters on the market, don't assume that Nintendo would simply prove themselves a soft touch with rage quitters. If players quit or disconnect numerous times in succession, they'll receive this stern yet hilarious message, insisting that their behaviour is pretty suspicious, which I'm sure is the same tone that I reckon your dads take when your mum insists that she's covered in body butter and deli meat because it fights wrinkles, and that those clothes on the floor are just props from a new play that she's in entitled The Man who wears hats and does me. Nice one, love. He'll never know, and also that's my one per list. Now, to be fair to Ninty, this is very in keeping with the world of Splatoon, but I think the real question is, why would you want to rage quit anyway? I mean, the rounds are really short and you get points even when you lose, so why not be a squid now and stop being such a kid now? And number 1, Tekken 7 basically makes you an online pariah. Though it wouldn't suit the Tekken franchise to start exploding players' heads or impaling them with giant spikes, the latest entry into the classic fighting series came up with a simple yet elegant way to earmark troublesome players to potential opponents. Now, during matchmaking, players with a high disconnection rate will have their name highlighted in yellow, and if they persist with rage quitting or disconnecting, their name will turn red. Oh no, you might think, oh, I've been hit with a color change, big deal. Well, this information is shown to your opponent before the match begins, allowing them to reject the fight and push you back into the matchmaking pool. Therefore, you might find yourself being rejected again and again, and the only way to undo this is to see matches through to the end cleanly. It puts the power in the hands of the other player, and honestly, it's a brilliant way to protect them from poor losers and teaches those who rage quit a lesson in the process. And there we go, those were 10 more harsh ways that video games punish you for rage quitting. But before you rage quit this video, my friend, I want to take that anger, that bubbling, seething mess within you, and turn it into something positive. Because you know what? You're bloody great. And I know I've never met you, but I'm sure that you're a pretty upstanding person who wishes the best for others around them and does their bit to pitch in for the greater good. And you know what? If you're feeling that you need a bit of help yourself, then why not speak out and ask for it? Because trust me, friends, family members, professionals in the support industry, we all care about you. We really do. Trust me on that. And if you want to chat about this or anything else, then you can follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. And as always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.